Make sure no one gets out alive. Running for HOA president was never part of my plan. Truthfully, I used to laugh at the idea of the board even mattering. But after months of watching Karen act as if the entire neighborhood belonged to her, as she ruled it from some invisible throne on her porch, I realized someone needed to step up before she started handing out royal orders with the morning mail. The breaking point came the day she proudly unveiled her brand new HOA security task force. It was a group of overzealous neighbors wearing tactical vests, pretending they were some elite law enforcement unit. They strutted around the streets like they were patrolling a battlefield instead of a quiet cul-de-sac. Welcome to Prodigy Tales. Make sure you like and subscribe for your top-notch HOA drama. My very first campaign promise was simple. Disarm the HOA cops. No more neighbors carrying loaded pistols while people were grilling burgers at block parties. No more rifles strapped across golf carts rolling slowly down the sidewalks. Just flashlights, radios, and a little common sense. You'd think I had suggested canceling Christmas entirely. The moment the words left my mouth, Karen's eyes widened as I had just slapped her with a violation notice from her own rulebook. The rumor spread through the neighborhood in minutes. Our community group chat lit up like a fireworks show. Half the residents were thrilled. They had been waiting for someone to finally challenge Karen's control and say what everyone else had been thinking. The other half, mostly Karen's loyal followers, immediately started whispering about how reckless I was, claiming I didn't care about safety and wasn't fit to run anything. Karen herself launched a full-scale smear campaign. She started calling emergency meetings, supposedly meant to protect community integrity, though no one really knew what that phrase was supposed to mean. Meanwhile, the HOA cops began watching me more closely. You know the type. Hands resting on their belts, sunglasses still on even when the sun had long gone down, fake authority dripping from every movement they made. Whenever I drove past them, I'd catch them leaning together, whispering and staring as if I had suddenly become the neighborhood's most wanted criminal. But I didn't let it get to me. I kept doing my normal routines, walking my dog around the block, waving to neighbors, posting flyers about the election. Slowly, something interesting started happening. People began nodding when they saw me, smiling. A few even stopped to say, "It's about time someone finally stood up to her." It drove Karen absolutely crazy. Every time she crossed paths with me, the corners of her mouth twitched like she was barely holding back a scream. But in the back of my mind, I knew things weren't finished. Karen wasn't the type of person who accepted losing gracefully. And those HOA officers she adored so much, they definitely didn't appreciate anyone reminding them they weren't actual police officers. I could feel the tension building in the neighborhood, like a storm sitting just beyond the horizon, waiting for the right moment to strike. Before we dive deeper into this story, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Karen never handled defeat quietly. The second my name appeared on the HOA election ballot, she switched personalities completely. The fake smile disappeared, replaced with a thin, tight glare that looked like it could sour milk. She began digging through years of HOA records, desperately trying to find anything she could use to disqualify me. Old noise complaints, late payments, even citations about grass being too tall. She tried every trick she could think of. The truth was, she was practically searching my life like it was a database she could scroll through with a magnifying glass. The problem for Karen was that the entire neighborhood already understood her tactics. People were exhausted from years of her constant control. The spying, the threats, the endless fines for ridiculous things like mailbox styles or the color of flowers planted in front yards. My campaign didn't revolve around grand promises. It focused on something everyone wanted: payback. I told residents exactly what they had been hoping to hear for years. I'll stop the power trips. I'll shut down the fake police force. And I'll bring some sanity back to this neighborhood. That was enough to turn me into the local hero almost overnight. Karen couldn't stand it. She started organizing emergency HOA meetings just so she could rant about me in front of everyone. "He's dangerous," she shouted one night, slamming her hand against the table. "He'll destroy everything we've built." But what she really meant by everything was her authority, her little gossip circle, and her iron grip on every detail of people's lives. Behind her sat the HOA cops, lined up like personal bodyguards. Their arms were folded across their chests as they glared at anyone who dared nod when I spoke. Not long after that, the warnings started appearing. Anonymous notes showed up inside my mailbox. Back off. You're making enemies. One message even had a cartoon drawing of a bullet next to the words. My wife begged me to walk away from the whole thing, but I couldn't. At that point, it wasn't only about me anymore. It was about every neighbor Karen had ever pushed around or threatened with fines. Then something happened that none of us expected. At the next community meeting, when I stood up to speak, people actually started cheering. Karen's jaw practically hit the floor. For the first time in years, the foundation of her power cracked. She could see the shift happening in real time. The votes were changing. People weren't afraid of her anymore. And that terrified her more than anything. After that night, the stares from her HOA cops turned colder. They stopped pretending to be friendly. Whenever their patrol cars rolled past my house, they slowed down just enough to stare at it like they were memorizing every detail. The air around the neighborhood felt heavier with each passing day, like something dark was slowly taking shape behind the scenes. Deep down, I knew the truth. Karen wasn't finished. The moment came at exactly 2:07 in the morning. The sound shattered the quiet night. First came a loud bang, then another sharper one that rattled the windows. I jumped out of bed, half asleep and confused, thinking someone nearby was setting off fireworks, until the drywall beside my head exploded. My wife screamed. I stared at the fresh hole punched through the wall. Outside, flashes of light flickered in the darkness, muzzle flashes, and that's when it hit me. Someone was firing at our house. I pulled my wife down to the floor, my heart pounding so violently I thought it might burst out of my chest. She was 7 months pregnant, trembling and crying while holding her stomach. Bullets ripped through the living room windows, tearing apart the curtains and shattering the picture frames hanging on the wall. Glass sprayed across the room like sparkling blades. The smell of gunpowder filled the air, and outside I could hear furious voices shouting. Through the chaos, I finally saw them. 3 men wearing black tactical vests stood in the yard, their fake HOA badges shining under the porch light. Karen's so-called HOA cops. They were shooting like they were assaulting a fortress instead of attacking a family home. My wife whimpered, and before I could fully cover her, she suddenly gasped in pain. A bullet had grazed her side, and blood was already soaking through her nightshirt. Something inside me broke. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911, shouting our address as I crawled toward the back door. The dispatcher spoke in a calm voice. Too calm, like this was nothing more than another routine call on an ordinary night. I didn't wait for instructions. I smashed the back window with a chair, helped my wife climb through, and dragged her behind the shed in our backyard. Her face had turned pale, and her breathing was quick and shallow, but she was still awake. We crouched there together while the gunfire finally faded into silence. In the distance, police sirens began to howl. Just before the real officers arrived, the HOA cops fled. Their truck tires screamed against the pavement as they sped away into the darkness. When the police finally pulled up, the place looked like a battlefield. Bullet holes riddled the siding of the house. Empty shell casings littered the grass. My wife's blood stained her hand. One officer looked around in disbelief and muttered, "Who the hell would do something like this?" I didn't say a word. I already knew the answer. Karen had finally gone too far. She wanted power. Now she was about to learn what real power actually looked like. Mine. Because after that night, I wasn't just campaigning for HOA president anymore. I was declaring war. By the time dawn arrived, the entire situation had exploded into something none of us had anticipated. A full criminal investigation had been launched, with prosecutors stepping in immediately. Evidence began piling up quickly. Shell casings recovered from the yard, surveillance camera footage, and statements from witnesses all connected the shooting directly to Karen and her so-called HOA security force. The men responsible didn't stay hidden for long. Within a week, investigators tracked them down. One was found hiding inside a cheap roadside motel. Another was discovered in his mother's garage. The third was caught while trying to burn a truck, hoping to destroy evidence. They had nowhere left to run. The arrests happened quickly and very publicly. Karen was taken into custody while sitting at her kitchen table, loudly insisting she was innocent. One by one, the shooters were placed in handcuffs and led away. The charges were serious: attempted murder, criminal conspiracy, impersonating law enforcement officers, weapons violations. As the indictments stacked up, the district attorney made it clear what the goal was: to pursue the harshest penalties the law allowed. For the first time, the community watched the justice system actually work the way it was supposed to. During the trial, prosecutors presented a mountain of evidence. Text messages, recorded conversations, and financial transfers all proved that Karen had funded and directed the entire attack. The testimony from the shooters themselves became the final nail in her coffin. Facing the possibility of spending the rest of their lives in prison, two of them admitted their involvement and openly identified Karen as the person who planned everything. The jury didn't take long. After less than a full day of deliberation, they returned with their verdict. When the sentencing hearing arrived, the judge showed no mercy. Karen received 35 years in prison without the possibility of parole for masterminding the attack. The shooters were also sentenced according to their roles: 30 years for the first man, 25 for the second, and 15 for the one who cooperated the most with investigators. The courtroom stayed completely silent, except for the sound of Karen crying as officers led her away in handcuffs. Shortly afterward, the HOA board immediately voted to dissolve the security task force she had created. They announced an emergency election, and this time there was no opposition. I was sworn in as HOA president by a unanimous vote. My very first actions were simple: ban weapons from all HOA activities, enforce full transparency in board decisions, and make sure that no one in our neighborhood would ever abuse power the way Karen had. My wife eventually recovered from her injury. Months later, our baby was born healthy and strong. Peace slowly returned to the neighborhood. The bullet holes in our walls have long since been repaired, but the memory of that night still lingers. A reminder of just how far some people will go to maintain control, and how, eventually, justice always finds its way back around. The end.